It's the final issue. Destro, Cobra Commander, the Crimson Twins, the most dangerous powers in the Energon Universe are at war, but only one can win. The road to G.I. Joe 1 ends here.
Don't they realize they're dealing with Destro?
Black leather, arm steel, silver mask, make you live in fear. Killer robot, gotta go by. All the weapons kick your butt.
Let us end this farce. There's work to do.
Hey, it's me, Mark, coming to you from the far reaches of the Energon Universe once again, and you are listening to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe comics podcast. If you want to find out more about Talking Joe, you can find out all of the details at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, today we will be looking at Destro issue 4 and the grand finale issue 5, released September the 18th and October the 16th, 2024. Now, we will be diving deep into these, so as always, despoiler alerts ahead. Now, joining me as always, orbiting the Earth with a next level knowledge of peace or destruction, it can only be a real American satellite. It's Tim Finn. How are you, sir?
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Right, so we are in the world of Destro 4 and 5, brought to us from the creative team of writer Dan Waters, artist Andrei Bressan, colorist Adriano Lucas, letterer Russ Wooton, editor Ben Abernethy, and logo and publication design from Andres Juarez. Production is Richard Mercado. Tim, remind me, what are those things that you find on the front of comic books?
Covers.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
This is where, if you're new to the show, I spend 38 minutes an episode talking, no, not that many, talking about all the variant covers, because I like talking about covers. What I see.
Let's go quick, Tim. There's a lot of covers.
All right. Cover to Destro 4 is by the regular team of Bressan and Lucas. We are on a rooftop, slight diagonal. Destro and Chameleon are both surprised as a bunch of missiles come down at them. I'm so struck with this cover by the color. There's just so much bluish purple and red and yellow and orange. All the reds get picked up in Destro's costume, in Chameleon's costume. The yellow gets picked up in her hair. The buildings in the background, the sky. It is an exciting cover. I wouldn't mind us being a little closer, like 10% closer to the characters, so they're a little bigger. This is one of those covers where there's enough negative space around them that if this was 30 years ago, I would expect a burst with some copy, like, "Lo, as Destro and Chameleon behold, rain down from the skies," or something like that. Nice cover. Cover B is drawn and colored by Sia Oyum. This is Destro entering a nightclub or a dinner party, and it refers to a scene that happens in the issue. In the issue, it is definitely a nightclub with, strobe lights and a disco ball, whereas here, this feels more like a dinner party based on how people are dressed and the architecture behind Destro. I was really thrown off with this cover by his costuming, because he's got a very, I guess, Scottish sort of winter coat with plaid. And
like Burberry type design.
Okay, thank you. And except for his necklace gem, he's not wearing any red, and there's basically no red on the cover. There's a purple, there's a sort of a light magenta all over the cover, and the logo that's kind of acting as the red. But since it does connect to a scene inside, I do give this cover my approval. I don't love how Oyum draws Destro's mask and face. He looks very young, and the mask feels just sort of like a regular flesh face. And I do think wherever you fall on the scale of sort of Destro wearing a mask that can't move, or Destro having a mask that's like silver flesh that moves precisely as his face does. I do think there should be elements of his helmet that say that have like edges or, bolts or sort of surfaces.
This cover, it's almost like an alternative take on the page on the inside. I think it's about page 9 where Destro makes his appearance. It's like, what if there was a different artist drawing that splash page?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the costumes do match, actually. Even down to him wearing this sort of white shirt or jacket that then has a black collar. Cover C is the 1 in 10 variant. This is drawn and colored by Nicola Cismezija. This is Xamot. This is a connecting cover with all the other C 1 in 10 ratio variant covers. Xamot is sort of large and looming in the middle ground. He's got a revolver. In the foreground are some Crimson Guardsmen drawn quite sort of stretched out vertically and stylized. Xamot is underlit. Behind him is a little bit of Cobra Commander's helmet, who is even larger and more looming in the further background. And then behind that is some sort of smoky, dark texture. This cover ends up being a kind of mirror image to the issue 2 1 in 10 C variant cover, which was Tomax on the left side of Co-Commander, and here's Xamot on the right side. Similarly, sort of underlit by blue with some Crimson Guards in the front. This is drawn and colored well enough. The inking is a little loose, and I think the actual sort of drawing style feels a little rough and stylized in a way that doesn't grab me, but as a 5-part connecting cover, it certainly works. And then cover D is the 1 in 25 ratio variant. It's scrap iron in front of his classified rocket launcher tank thing. He's holding a pistol, and there's no background except for the Hector Garrido homage 1982 painted explosion background. I really like this drawing. I like the inking on Scrap Iron's face, which shows that he's backlit, because there's a lot of sort of inking in the middle of his arms, in the middle of his legs, in the middle of his nose and forehead and chin. And subtly, the camera here is a little lower than waist height. So we're looking slightly up at his missile launcher and also him. And we see Scrap Iron so infrequently in G.I. Joe comics and animation. He's one of my favorite characters. He's the 3rd figure I ever got. And I love his costume. And we so rarely just get to see him and sort of see him in all of his glory. We might see him head and shoulders or in the background or mostly not at all. So this is a fun, cool cover. And that one is drawn by Travis Moore and colored by series color artist Adriano Lucas. And then the 1 in 50 variant cover is drawn and colored by Homare, an artist I'm not really familiar with. And this is Chameleon. There's the style here is much more like manga, both in sort of her eyes and her facial proportions, how youthful she looks. She's sort of running. She's got her crazy sniper rifle. Her hair is blowing in the wind, sort of as she's running and turning. There isn't a sort of traditional proper background. 2/3 of the background are just vertical white columns, but behind Chameleon, knocked back in a very light blue, is Destro. We're seeing his head and shoulders and arm and a giant gun, and there's a crosshairs that's been imprinted over his head. So the implication here is that as we see him, that's how she sees her through her sight. And then there's a vignette, there's another vertical sliver behind him of some background, which looks like, let's say, European building exterior with sort of windows and this is a pretty striking cover because there's dark against light, there's dark against white, there's these strong verticals, and it's one of those covers where for them they're not really being a background. It's still very satisfying. It doesn't feel like this artist, just sort of drew a character and nothing else. And there is a retailer incentive, right, Mark?
That's right. This one has the continuing connecting covers from Tyler Kirkham, which is a Gotham City Limit exclusive. This one features a fairly straightforward, straight-on shot of Scrap Iron firing a missile from his classified missile launch device thing.
Destro issue 5 has its A cover by the regular team of Bressan and Lucas. This is Destro fighting Tomax and Xamot, seemingly as they are in the middle of an avalanche of rocks and dirt, maybe as if a mountain or a building above them has exploded and is starting to either rain down on them, or all three of them are sort of fighting and running and fleeing at the same time. So a lot of movement to this, strong diagonals in their poses. We see them all from waist up. Destro is punching both of them, or punching one and cocking back with his fist on the other. Both Tomax and Xamot each have a pistol and a knife. Tomax is firing off a shot, so you get some sort of yellow and glowing yellow on the top. I like this cover. This is more of the composition and sort of closeness to the characters that I was thinking of for the cover to 4A, although I do understand why the cover to 4A wants to show you so much of that building, rooftop, and skyline. But I really like Bressan's covers, and I like Lucas's colors on them. Sanford Green draws and colors the B cover to Destro 5. Sanford Green, best known for drawing the Image series Bitter Root, and also most recently the Jonathan Hickman Doom special that Marvel published, which is about to get an oversized reprint. So this is no background. This is a portrait. This is a side portrait of Destro's head and a bit of his shoulders with that red collar. And the background's all black, and there's a lot of black ink within Destro's metallic head and neck, but enough space within that Green draws Scrap Iron, a Bat, an Iron Grenadier, Mercer Chameleon, and then is it Tomax and Xamot up top?
And even Cobra Commander on the left.
And even Cobra Commander on the left, right. He almost disappears because his faceplate is metallic, and so that almost just disappears as more metallic. This is a pretty striking cover. There is no background. It's just all black, but sort of about as different as you could get from the A cover. And for a cover that doesn't have any story component, I think it works really well. And it's been fun to see Green draw some Energon Universe stuff. Cover C, the 1 in 10, is one more by Cismezija. This is Scrap Iron. We're now at the far end of the 5-part connecting cover. Scrap Iron has sort of fiery smoke behind him. He's head and shoulders and chest sort of, looming in the middle ground, and then in the foreground are 3 bats that are sort of on fire. He is underlit, and he's very much red and black here, not red and blue, or sort of magenta red and dark blue. Marco Ferrari draws the 1 in 25 D cover, draws and colors. This is the sort of character design, we think, that Ferrari did for Chameleon. The Destro book was having some scheduling challenges, and so rather than regular artist Andrei Bressan designing Chameleon's costume, Marco Ferrari, who draws the Scarlet miniseries, designed this costume. This has the explosion background. We are looking down at Chameleon. She's holding her crazy giant long-necked sniper rifle, and she's so sort of elongated in how Ferrari draws her, and we're sort of higher than her looking down at her, that for one of these explosion back covers, this is sort of the most different of all of them, right? certainly at the beginning, it felt like they could have been 1980s G.I. Joe package artwork, even if they weren't painted, because we were sort of looking straight on. There's just a Joe or a Cobra, and then this classic explosion behind them. Some of them, the sort of drawing style or the camera angle, it starts to feel less like 1982 G.I. Joe toy packaging. I do like this cover. I do think it works. It doesn't really feel like, a 1982 pose or drawing or angle, but I still like it. And then Torrin Clark draws the 1 in 50 cover for Destro 5, draws and colors. And this is the slightly unusual composition where characters are battling and facing to the left. I know the previous cover I just talked about, Chameleon is facing to the left, but more often than not, covers in American comics, characters are looking straight forward or facing to the right. So this is Destro in a classic battle stance, one leg bent, one arm pointing, another arm cocked, holding a machine gun. Behind him is Mercer in his 1987 costume. More on that later. He's holding 2 machine guns or submachine guns. And then behind him, kneeling, is Scrap Iron, and he has an AK-47 or a Kalashnikov. Behind him are 2 bats. And in the immediate foreground, so the camera here is on the ground. The camera is about 6 inches or 12 inches off the ground. And we are looking up at Destro, Mercer, and Scrap Iron. In the immediate foreground, taking up the bottom left of this cover, is a dead Crimson Guardsman, helmet and shoulders. Behind all these characters is a Hiss tank also facing left. And behind that is a fiery yellow and orange explosion. This is really nicely composed and rendered. It's got a bunch of favorite characters, and though it doesn't allude specifically to a moment in this comic, it's enough of a battle scene that it could both be a cover for this issue and also just a nice standalone image that has a little bit of story component. It's not just a pinup, and very nicely rendered.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite covers from the whole of this series. I do think that Mercer's, while it sort of evokes the original outfit that he's got from, was it 1987?
Oh, you know what? You're right.
It's actually closer to his outfit as drawn by
Tom Riley in Duke #1. Yeah, you're right. I take that back. That's a good correction. And then there's a Tyler Kirkham.
Yeah, a giant Mercer from Tyler Kirkham as the Gotham City Limit retailer variant. He's looking really hulked up. Friend of the show, Jay Cordray, described him as looking like a Dale Cohen Hulk. So yeah, definitely he's been hitting the old roids for this one. What's next? It's plot breakdown time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. A lot happened in these 2 issues, so I'll try my best to encapsulate it in a probably longer than normal plot breakdown. With Destro presumed dead, the Crimson Twins seize Mars for themselves by offering a very big check to the acting CEO of Mars, Darklon. The twins are shown a demonstration of the battle android troopers, and while initially impressed, they see that the bats turn on each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe, and the twins call them utterly unmarketable. Elsewhere, Destro has been poring through secret military files given to him by General Flagg. One involves Conrad Duke Hauser encountering an intelligent fighter jet, and also learns that the CIA has infiltrated various American companies to steal technology secrets. Destro crashes the Hybrid Technologies Party organised by CEO Astoria Colton Ritz, who makes an escape out of the back door. Scrap Iron fires a rocket at her, which Astoria neutralises with an EMP blast from her own body. It is then confirmed that Astoria is Chameleon, and her father experimented on her so that she could be able to deliver these EMP fluke blasts. We find out that Project Overkill was her father's pet project, a peacekeeping artificial intelligence satellite in control of airborne drones that could learn about and neutralize potential threats before they happen. But it was making its own decisions, which led to it attacking the arms fair. Tomax and Xamot dig through Destro's files and arrange a meeting with Cobra Commander for the continued supply of Energon in exchange for use of their foot soldiers. Cobra Commander's arrival at Mars is interrupted by the return of Destro, who goes mano a mano with the Crimson Twins. While his army of 3, Chameleon, Scrapiron and Mercer, attack the rest of the Twins' forces. The Crimson Guard retreat to the basement, where the bats are activated, turning into a flesh blender, while the remaining forces are attacked from the sky by Overkill's drones. As Destro is on the cusp of victory, he stands down his forces and instead proposes an alliance. The forces of Mars and extensive enterprises united under the banner of Cobra to keep the world in a state of perpetual war, as it is meant to be. Later, as a romantic gesture for his new lover, Astoria, Destro launches a nuclear warhead which destroys the Overkill satellite out in space. As a second epilogue, at the family tomb, Destro teaches Darklon a lesson, fixing a burning hot mask to his face. And as a third epilogue to the last 2 epilogues, Cobra Commander is alerted to the destruction of Overkill, as he predicted, but also a meteor-like mechanical object descending from Cybertron and entering Earth's orbit. Phew, Tim. What an awful lot of plots.
Yes, I think your plot breakdown was almost twice as long as me talking about the covers.
So, before I get into the plot and all of the rest of it, talking about like kind of the look of this book, your comment about the cover for issue 4 and the pinks and purples made me think really about the overall look of this series, that it's very technicolor. There is a lot of bright colors, a lot of pink, a lot of purple. It's sort of cranking that sort of contrast and vividness on the old color dial a little bit up to 11. And I think because I read these a little early on screen before I then look at the paper copy a little bit later on, I think part of my reaction is to seeing that on the screen, and I think the series does come across better on paper, where that color is somewhat slightly muted through the printing process as to seeing it on screen. But yeah, it's a definite look to this series of the vividness of the color, don't you think?
Yeah, and a comparison might be Adriano Lucas's colors for Destro and Lee Lowridge's colors for Scarlet. Scarlet, there's a little less saturation and there's just a little less color. That's still a really handsome book, and I think Lowridge does a great job and is a good fit for that artist, Marco Ferrari. But, there's just a lot of yellows and oranges because there's fire and explosions, and there are a lot of pinks and magentas and reds because there are a lot of red costume details, on Destro and the Crimson Guard and Scrap Iron and the sashes on Tomax and Xamot. And, if I can look at art and I can sort of imagine it with different colors, and I can sometimes look at art and imagine it with different inks. And, I can look at this and, if you're holding issue 5 of Destro and you look at the blues on the very first panel of Destro number 5, the blues in the background, the like slight glow on that top light under the word HQ, the blue in Cobra Commander's sort of neck and collar, the blue on his helmet. There's just a lot of color going on there. Now flip ahead 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so on page 9, there's this very small panel of Chameleon. She's just fired her sniper rifle. We're looking up at her, and there's some shadows, and she says, "You're too kind, Mercer." There's a little green in the metal grayish behind her, and then the sort of air conditioning duct or catwalk that she's standing on has some blue and a tiny bit of red in it. If you look at these 2 pages, there's a lot of orange, right? 3 or 4 of these panels just have orange backgrounds where someone's getting punched or shot or strangled. You could color this whole book like this panel with Chameleon in it, where the backgrounds are more gray. Sure, one of them may have some green in it, one gray may have some blue in it. But yes, I think part of why I like the cover to 4A so much is that I want a G.I. Joe comic to look like this. I want there to be a lot of color and a lot of popping. And, when I flip through issue 1 from Marvel, any version, reprint, original, even though there's sort of only one color for anything, right? Like green costume is green. There's no highlight. Yellow hair is yellow. There's no, sort of shadow color. I'm just seeing sort of colors that pop. And to me, G.I. Joe is like action figure toys and animation cells and comic books that sort of match those. And I don't want, muted colors, and I don't want necessarily a limited color palette. I think the IDW Cobra series with Chuckles was a great book, and that deserved a certain art and color approach. But all things being equal, I want G.I. Joe to look like the cover to Destro 4A. and I love the colors over in Cobra Commander, and I love the colors over in Duke and the preview pages, for G.I. Joe #1. And all 4 of these color artists have different approaches, and there are some subtle differences and then some overlap.
Yeah,
like
you could
see the textures that Jordi Belair is doing in Duke and in Cobra Commander. I don't see those textures in. I see very few of those textures in the colors for Destro, for example, and that's fine.
Yeah, you could see these comics looking almost entirely different as a result of switching around the colorists and the different approaches. It definitely brings a very distinct look to the different series, that different use of color. So we've got to the end of issue 5, and we've talked before about these mini-series, to what extent are they setting us up ready for G.I. Joe, and sort of to some degree moving the kind of the chess pieces forward to get them in the place that we'd want them to be for the beginning of the new series. And we kind of predicted that this Destro series might be that stepping stone that helps Cobra kind of cement itself into something that resembles Cobra, the Cobra organization that we know and love. And to some degree, we're there. We're at the very end of issue 5. We are left in the position where Destro has, Destro with his Iron Grenadiers plus Mercer and Scrap Iron and now Chameleon, plus the Crimson Twins with the Crimson Guard, and the implication that they'll bring other troops and foot soldiers into the Cobra legions, and then Cobra Commander sort of sitting at the top of it, pretty inscrutable, commanding it all and keeping his own secrets as well. So we've kind of got to the place that we thought we might get to by the end of the series.
Yeah, I loved that turn, that surprise where Destro's fighting Tomax and Xamot, and they had all promised each other they would kill each other. Mm-hmm. And well, Tomax isn't going to kill Xamot. Tomax and Xamot are going to kill Destro. Destro's going to kill Tomax and Xamot. And this is at the end of issue 5, and Destro says, this is near the end of issue 5. And Destro says, "I forgive you." And I thought, what a great surprise. And I wonder if this is what you get for having someone new to G.I. Joe, in Dan Waters, writing this character, writing a quarter of all the G.I. Joe comics so far. Maybe that notion that they can't be antagonistic came from Joshua Williamson or, Ben Abernethy or Kirkman. But, we know that the villains of G.I. Joe have always bickered and fought. There have been multiple storylines called Cobra Civil War. And, even back to the first episode from 1982, Destro and Cobra Commander, when they first meet up in the first episode, they're they're aggravated with each other. It's not like, welcome old friend. It's, where have you been? It's like, well, I was delayed because of your thing. So I like that there's sort of this satisfying fight that's, the fight between Destro and the twins is several pages long, and it's visceral. Like we haven't seen these three characters be very physical in a lot of G.I. Joe stories over the years. They tend to call the shots from afar or stand in front of people, and make speeches. And the cover to Destro 5, it promises a fight, and the issue gives you not just these three people fighting, but sort of the forces fighting. As you said, Destro's army of three. It's a sort of a double punch, because he says, I forgive you. We need to work together. And then he says, get out. And I thought, right. This is his series. This is not Cobra Commander issue 5. This is not Tomax and Xamot issue 5. We need to stay with him, and he still needs to be, the driver, even though he's sort of losing his autonomy to Cobra Commander, or that it might go that way. And he certainly lost his company briefly to these two guys. So this is one way of me saying, I like how this miniseries ends.
Yeah, get the hell out of my building, and while you're at it, get the hell out of my series too while you're at it. Destro at the end of it, he's sort of, his costume is torn, his face is bloodied, but I think the blood on his face isn't his own. I think it is just Tomax and Xamot's blood, sort of trickling down the metal of his mask. So shall we rewind a little bit back to issue 4? So Tomax and Xamot, they're sort of making the power play and looking to buy up Mars from Darklon. It's probably my favorite bit of dialogue. There's good dialogue in this series. I think when you sort of slow yourself down and look at the dialogue in this series from Dan Waters, there's some really good stuff there, and this particular one is where Darklon is showing some reluctance to sell, but then one of the I think it's one Tomax or Xamot says, yes, but look at this really big check. It might take a second to finish reading. Xamot's hand ended up cramping from writing all of those zeros.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about this scene with Darklon, a little I Spy there, and this is cribbed from the Audible Interlude podcast, who made this observation that we've got an I Spy from a guest appearance of Richter from the 1990s X-Force here, who is guest starring as Darklon.
Yes, I think actually in the back of my mind I had a half-formed thought. Like, this doesn't look like Darklon, but it does look like someone in comics.
This is long-haired,
green
superhero,
green top, some stuff on his chest. Okay, so here, this is page 1 and 2 of Destro issue 4. We do see Mercer. I got that wrong when I was talking about the covers. We do see Mercer here in his 1987 original toy costume.
True.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time in the Energon Universe.
Unless there was an earlier issue of Destro that I'm forgetting about.
I feel like I would have written. I think I would have written that down and remembered it, because I love his costume. And his costume has always been. It's supposed to make you think of a Viper costume, because in the original continuity, he's an ex-Viper. So, he's got somewhat matching colors and some cues, right? Like, he's wearing a sleeveless jacket vest, and, the Vipers have a, armor vest on top of anyway. So I like that.
I'm just flicking back to issue 1. He does show up in that same costume in issue 1.
Oh, really? He's in his 1987 costume in Destro issue 1?
Yeah, it's maybe less obvious because he's sort of, you just see you don't see him in, I think, full profile. But yeah, the Arms Fair appearance, he's
right,
in
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair because, Destro has had several costume changes throughout this series and even Duke. Okay, but I did want to point out that Scrap Iron has an alternate costume.
Okay.
In not even these 2 issues, in one panel of this final issue.
Yeah, it's only in 5, 1, 2, about the 3rd page from the last, when they're in the Destro's tomb. He's holding Darkline,
right.
And super small. He's in a sort of a green version of the costume.
Yeah, and I think that's neat. I don't think that's a coloring mistake. I do think it's a little confusing. From the context, we know who this is, because on that page in the tomb, Darkline says, "Mercer, Scrap Iron, what is this?" So, thank you. I know who that is. But, and characters can change costumes.
Indeed, Destro on that page seems to be wearing something different again. He's kind of, instead of the black costume with sort of red highlights, he seems to be wearing a red costume with black ribbing highlights underneath a kind of cloak thing.
Okay, so I don't mind that Scrap Iron is in a different costume, and I do like this different costume. What throws me off is that when he shows up in this different costume, even though both times he's identified by name, he's very small. So there's just not a lot of real estate for me to sort of see him and take it in visually and say, yep, that's Scrap Iron. And also, I sort of feel like the rules of his costume are red and or blue. And again, it's not that he can't wear green, but if in this scene Mercer was wearing a yellow jacket and orange pants, it's like, oh, is that later version of Leatherneck? Or like, oh, is that Spearhead? So my preference is that when a character changes costume, we see them sort of bigger so that it's really clear. And again, also without his helmet here, sort of the scars on Scrap Iron's face are really, really tiny. It's like 2 tiny, tiny, tiny lines. So both for clarity and also because I'm always satisfied when I see a character in either their proper costume or a fun sort of reinvention of their costume. That is my preference,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't want to see Duke walking around in like a purple shirt and like orange pants. That's not Duke. It doesn't have to be mustard and green, but it usually should be.
Fair enough. So back where we were in the story, after that scene where Tomax and Xamot are buying Mars and getting the demonstration, we're into Destro looking. Destro is looking at some secret files while the narration is a letter, which we find out is back to General Hawk and delivered in a bouquet, which is a particularly nice touch. And as he concludes, he says, "You have my thank." I'll do it in a Sean Connery accent again for consistency. "You have my thanks for your assistance, for granting me access to such secret files and safe passage with immunity to the United States. I look forward to many more years of mutually profitable partnerships between Mars Industries and the United States military. God bless America, God bless the stability of the dollar, and God bless you, General Flagg, your dearest friend, Laird Destro." It sort of took me a little bit out of the story. There's a couple of points where it's like, when you're reading comics, you have to suspend your disbelief. It's not reality. There was a couple of places where it did there, which was... The first place was like this idea that the bats were completely unable to differentiate friend from foe, particularly one bat from another, because you think just basic friend from foe technology, having some sort of transponder, you see that is a bat, you're not going to fire at it, would seem to be quite a basic component of AI that shouldn't be something that they'd figure out. So, as a story point, I thought, maybe they can't differentiate between, enemies and civilians, but, enemies from another bat should be pretty straightforward to do. But in this scene here, I was like, Destro is being given an awful lot of unredacted classified material. They're being very loose with their secrets here.
Yeah. This didn't jump out at me as them being so loose with their secrets as much as it sort of made me sad, because there's cynicism here, that he's pointing out all of the trespasses and foibles of the American government and the American military. And I'm reading this comic as escapism, and the subtitle of this G.I. Joe is not A Real American Hero, it's the other one. The subtitle of this one might be Aliens in Energon and Betrayal, Oh My. But so here I was struck by just how sort of bad it is. Like over in Larry Hama's G.I. Joe, you don't get this idea that the government keeps making mistakes in invading other territories, or sort of over committing and over declaring war, as much as sort of the Joes themselves have to deal with difficult missions and not enough support. And with this scene, I think two things. One, okay, well, this is going to come back later in G.I. Joe and also the Energon Universe. There will be a scene in a later comic where Destro will say to Cobra Commander, I know something that the government doesn't want us to know. Or Destro will say to some Decepticon, oh, I know a weak point at this, military installation because of a secret that they're hiding there that they don't want me to know. And also, it just sort of made me not like sad as a person and an American, but as a reader, like, oh right, I'm reading. The star of this miniseries is the villain, and so for him to succeed, bad things are happening. And bummer, Destro's got all this stuff he's not supposed to have, which might just be a way of saying what you said, but sort of from a different point of view.
And so he also finds out that the CIA has been infiltrating American companies. So let me again get into character. I also read with interest how you have been scrambling to discover who on planet Earth might be working on similar technology. How the CIA have been infiltrating American companies on American soil to steal industrial secrets. A name on the list of corporations you suspected stood out to me. Things are falling into place. Mercer, have you missed me? Did you, like me, kind of connect those 2 points together? That the CIA have been infiltrating American companies to steal their secrets, and then him leaping on the phone. Well, and then the next beat being he's calling Mercer.
I didn't know what to make of those two together, or that first one.
I didn't think it was accidental. I thought there was a definite kind of implication there that perhaps Mercer is one of these agents, and beyond that Destro was either suspected or saw a name on the corporations that made him think that possibly Mercer might be a CIA spy. But that point doesn't get followed up in either of these two issues. So perhaps that's me joining together dots that shouldn't be joined together.
I didn't see a connection with Mercer, but in that first half, CIA and infiltration, I thought two things. One, is this planting a seed that some other writer or Dan Waters can figure out later, and it isn't any more specific or solved now? Or is it that this is very much about sort of which players know what like some part of the government knows about Cybertronians and some other part of the government doesn't. Some people in the military, like Hawk, do, and others don't. And so if we sort of move another step to the left or the right or up or down, it's like, okay, what about the CIA? Is this a reference to various players or potential players sort of knowing that there's alien life, having maybe worked with alien life, or knowing about Energon or having worked with Energon? So I wasn't sure how sort of concrete that this Destro observation was. And then two, anytime anything in G.I. Joe mentions the CIA, I think of Chuckles. So I don't think this is where Chuckles shows up. I don't think this is planting a seed for Chuckles to do something later. Sooner or later, if you're dealing with not just the U.S. military, but the sort of special forces G.I. Joe team, sooner or later you're going to talk about military police or border crossing guards or the National Guard or the FBI or the CIA. Sooner or later, this other stuff is going to get mentioned because you're going to go to a certain territory or have a certain kind of interaction. And that doesn't have to mean Chuckles, but I do have this knee-jerk thing in G.I. Joe story. Chuckles.
Yeah, my knee-jerk, I think, is to think of those sleazy CIA agents that went on missions with the G.I. Joe team, particularly in the pages of special missions, who are kind of not to be trusted. I read a summary of this issue where the writer of that summary kind of leapt to the conclusion that the name on the list of the corporations was Hybrid Industries, which could make some sense to some degree, that's maybe then him joining the dots of Colton Astoria Ritz and why he then visits her immediately after.
I wonder if, what would be great is if 5 issues, 10 issues into G.I. Joe, if we all reread these 4 miniseries, stuff starts to stick out in a different way. Mm-hmm. That it's not just the things that happened before issue 1 of G.I. Joe, but, references and characters and seeds that are being planted that they are watering for those seeds right now for growth later.
Before we move on from that scene, I'll point out a couple of Easter eggs. So there was that private with Flag, who's got
Ferez?
a name, Ferez Dana, it seems to say, and that is named after a writer, Ferez, who is a friend of Andrei Bressan, Danilo Ferez. So I think this is an Easter egg of him sneaking in his friend's name into the pages of the comic.
Okay, this is definitely not a G.I. Joe reference. This is not a G.I. Joe character or a G.I. Joe supporting character.
I do not believe so.
Okay.
And someone pointed out, error detected here, that Private Ferez's uniform should be displaying her Armed Forces branch on her left breast, not her first name. There we go. So we're with Astoria, aka Chameleon. We've got a couple of Easter eggs here in this sequence as well. She says, in the Girl Who Loved Power Glides, the cartoon where the character originated from originally, she says, "It's my party and I'll cry if I want to." Here she says, "It's my party and I'll get us all blacked out if I want to." The character in the pages, the character in the cartoon as well also has this sort of ability to jinx any machine that she touches, whereas here it's actually explained as a superpower of a sort. It's a personal EMP burst, a fluke power that was, I guess, put in as robotic implants. So that kind of explains the plot point from back all the way from issue 1 as well. it explains why at the arms fair when they were shot, there was that missile which didn't explode and was a seeming dud, and also why when Destro was fighting her previously that his rockets fizzled out. So we get to understand that. We also find out about Overkill, which in G.I. Joe before is kind of like the Bat Commander and is an actual kind of character robot. Here it is an AI satellite that is controlling these drones. Reading specifically issue 4, I saw that there was a kind of problem in need of a solution, which was that the bats didn't have kind of enough AI capabilities and brain power. And then here we had Overkill, which was normally described as the Bat Commander, and also a super AI has a super AI capability. So I thought those two pieces would seem to connect together quite nicely. That overcome the bats, friend on friend firing, and the abilities of Overkill. But as Overkill was seemingly blown out of the sky and destroyed, that prediction of mine did not come to pass.
So in the same way that I made that comment earlier about a character like Scrap Iron showing up for just a panel or two and being in a different costume and very small, I found the depiction in issue 5 of the destruction of Overkill to be a little unclear. So Destro's having a nice dinner with Astoria, and in the distance, a nuke launches. Mm-hmm. And I briefly thought it was 2 nukes launching, but now I'm looking at it and I think it's 1 nuke, and then later it's just higher up. Mm-hmm. Maybe there could be a little less yellow in that second panel down at the bottom.
Yep.
So you turn the page, they're kissing. She says, "Thank you." Because he says a few panels earlier, "I do not trust Overkill." And she says, "What have you done?" And he says, "I collect nuclear warheads." And she says, "Yes, I suppose it's for the best." So you turn the page and they're kissing and she says, "Thank you." And we're seeing, this is curvilinear perspective. We're not just looking sort of past them. We're looking sort of up, and you could sort of map, like we're inside a globe. You could sort of, if the atmosphere was one layer, you could paint a grid on it and you could see the curves of longitude and latitude. So up on the top, there's this explosion very high in the sky, or in, I guess, low Earth orbit. And then in the next panel, there's some metal stuff and some smoke over Earth with a star field behind it. And I read issue 5 4 weeks after I read issue 4. And flipping through issue 5, we don't see Overkill. Mm-hmm. We definitely see Overkill in issue 4. We see a satellite. It's got, it's a metal cylinder, and it's got 2 solar panels on either side of it. And it's got distinctive colors. It's green. It's got a glowing red thing on the bottom. The bottom of it is gold. And I could have used sort of another panel in this scene in issue 5 where we see the satellite and the missile approaching it, and then the explosion. Or we see it exploding both from down on Earth as the 2 humans are kissing, but also in space with sort of more visually distinguishing bits of it that are, getting exploded away. So I looked up and I thought, yes, I should have reread. And this will certainly work if you just sit down and read the inevitable Destro 5-issue softcover trade paperback. But I just saw some space debris, and I thought, and I appreciate that in this scene in issue 5, he doesn't say, "I'm going to blow up Overkill with my nuclear missiles." What he says is, "I don't trust Overkill." And she says, "What have you done?" And he says, "I collect nuclear warheads." And then you see nuclear warhead launch, and then you see something blow up. But initially I thought, with that panel of them kissing and the explosion, I thought, oh, is he just getting rid of his nuclear warheads? Because that is a thing you see in stories, in comic books and in movies and in TV shows. So I don't know if this is sort of script or if this is art and storytelling, but I would have liked one more panel or one more beat.
Yeah. Come back to my place and I'll show you my nuclear warhead.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and also, you think of Astoria, you kind of have to remember as well that Astoria and a relationship with Overkill, particularly in that issue 5, it seems like, it is working on her behalf. It's attacking her enemies / Destro's enemies, sort of, acting on her commands. But sort of, flicking back to 4 and having that more fresh in your mind, she's sort of saying that it's kind of acting on its own decisions, and that she's afraid of it. You're afraid of it. I'm afraid of what it might do. Watching us, always watching us.
Have you more? Are we still going through these 2 issues somewhat in order, page by page?
So we've sort of done with 4, which we flick to 5. 5 is basically an all-out battle between the forces of extensive enterprises and Destro and his 3-man army.
I'm struck in issue 5 by the pain and death. Maybe for an issue or 2, that this was rated T for teen. There it is. That's so tiny on the front cover, top of the barcode. The level of violence and destruction and death and people in pain and physical distress in issue 5. Destro's punching Xamot and Tomax is punching Destro, and there's a big sound effect. I guess it's KC something K. We'll just say crick, crack. That's one thing, but we don't see it, but we hear it. Mercer mows down. Oh, there's another one actually. There's another bit where
that's the line from Mercer. Just look at all this ammunition. I think it would look better inside your skulls. And then next scene is a blam 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 in the background.
So I'm going to interrupt myself. Just one more observation of characters in a costume that's not their usual costume. This guy with the buzz cut here, or the flat top here, who's in a Crimson Guardsman costume near a bunch of Crimson Guardsmen, getting to a room full of machine guns, and he says, "You mean these weapons?" I thought, who is that? And yes, Tim, from context, we've only seen one big guy with that haircut in this whole story. But we haven't seen him dressed in this costume. We haven't seen him dressed in this enemy's costume. That's what Tomax and Xamot's guys wear. And no one refers to him here. No one says, Mercer, have you gotten to the armory ahead of the Crimson Guardsmen that you are fake leading? So it might be that, I read this late in the evening and I was reading it with 90% attention and not 100% attention. But I do feel like there's another small bit here where whether it's like I could have one more panel or one more sort of costume cue or one more bit where someone's name gets called out, I don't think this would actually work for this story beat. But if, for example, in this scene, he's like zipping up the Crimson Guardsman while he's running to the armory, if he's zipping up the Crimson Guardsman sort of jacket and you see his blue and red Mercer costume under it, I don't know.
Or perhaps later on he's unzipping it and you see his Mercer costume or underneath.
Yeah.
But to your point, he's the only unhelmeted Crimson Guardsman here. His face doesn't look, massively distinctive as Mercer. It's only really by, putting the pieces together from the rest of the book and the context that it comes together in kind of retrospect. But the only other Crimson Guard that we've previously seen unhelmeted is in the pages of issue 2, where there's a Crimson Guard with a similar sort of hairstyle and a similar sort of hair colour at the computer talking to them. So this is, up to this point, this is the only unhelmeted Crimson Guardsman that we've seen before. So my initial thought was, it's that guy again. But,
so I want...
Yeah, Mercer's typically got darker hair. It's in those panels it looks quite orangey red, which you don't necessarily think when you think of Mercer.
I want the writers to write up to me. I don't want everything to be spelled out. If a scene jumps ahead by 10 minutes, if a villain, if a smart person, hero or villain, has a plan, and they don't explain it, and then we jump in 10 minutes into the plan unfolding, okay, well, a bunch of Crimson Guardsmen are being led here and they get mowed down, and then a bunch of them flee and they go down to where the bats are, and I think, I think I know where this is going to go, because why would you have them in front of bats unless the bats were going to turn on and shoot them all? No one said, begin the mission, leading the Crimson Guardsmen astray to the basement. Operation Basement Ho. And indeed, Destro has a little device, and he pushes a button, and you then see one Crimson Guardsman arm sort of getting shot up, dropping a pistol, and it's implied that they all get mowed down. The Crimson Guardsmen who make their way into the basement with some bats there that get turned on.
Yeah, with that line of dialogue too. Oof, rather a flesh bender down there. Oh, oof, rather a flesh blender down there.
Right, and that's where I figured it out. Okay, this Crimson Guardsman, who sort of has Mercer's haircut, is standing next to Chameleon and Scrap Iron. Oh, that's the trio, right? So I wouldn't mind, but I don't require, and I think I appreciate that Dan Waters didn't throw in a line at the beginning of the issue where Destro says, all right, you three, get into your positions. Mercer, get in your costume. I don't need that much. I appreciate that I have to figure this out, and I'm thrown into the scene and the next scene a little bit halfway in. But at the same time, I do need one additional element to know who this is, and it might be, yes, down to his hair color is a little off, or this sort of costume bit that I was describing. Okay, so let me stop interrupting myself. Who's Mercer? What's going on? And back to a lot of people get killed in this issue off panel in really horrible ways. And I am aware of, back in issue 1 of Cobra Commander beating someone to death, and other characters dying in interesting and horrible ways across the 20 Energon Universe G.I. Joe comics so far. And I feel like issue 4 of Destro was a break from that, and issue 5, we're back to it. So I had sort of forgotten things got this bloody, and here we are.
I think part of it is how senseless it is, because not only do they have this, bloody war in issue 5, but I think it's issue 2 where sort of extensive enterprises and Destro's forces are sort of battling each other as well, and then they come to the truce, and it's like, so much blood has flowed underneath the bridge by this point that them combining forces, if only they'd done it earlier on, could have avoided all of this destruction and waste of life and it's never the leaders, is it? It's always the poor soldiers on the ground.
Yeah. On the one hand, I think Dan Waters is responding to the audience's thirst for blood and revenge, in the same way that Tomax and Xamot have done this wrong, they have wronged Destro, he gets to have his revenge, or circumstances have wronged Chameleon and she gets to take part in her revenge, and Darklon has betrayed Destro and Destro gets to have his, I just hit my microphone, and Destro gets to have his, sort of familial revenge. But yeah, you make a good point. I think I'm not struck that a room full of Crimson Guardsmen get shot or a room full of Crimson Guardsmen get zapped and cut up by bats. It's that bad guys are killing bad guys, and in a few pages they're all going to be on the same side, and some characters who witness it sort of enjoy it. So I'm not a prude, and again, the title of this book is not Hero, this isn't the Shipwreck miniseries, this isn't the Leatherneck miniseries, this is the Destro miniseries, right? And in the first issue, he talks about man being in a perpetual state of war.
And the subtitle for the collection is The Enemy.
Right. So I'm not saying I don't like this. I'm not saying, boo to, the Energon, to Skybound for making such a bloody book. I appreciate that there are stakes. I guess I'm slightly uncomfortable with it, but I think we're supposed to be. I think you read this and you think, oh, that's unfortunate. Those bad guys killed those bad guys. That's unfortunate. Those interesting bad guys got mowed down senselessly, right? I sure hope these bad guys stop killing each other. sure hope people stop killing each other.
So we finish up the book with the second epilogue of Richter. Darklon being taken to the family tomb of Destro, and in a parallel to the Destro origins, he's given he's now the man of the Iron Mask of this heated up familiar mask, which we'd recognise from the toy of Darklon, seemingly being picked up with tongs and we imagine, because it's done off panel, being pressed against his face. And a nasty scene, but brings a lot to the origin story of Darklon.
Yeah, something that I'm aware of every 3 or 4 pages reading these 20 Road to G.I. Joe comics is, what are we seeing for the first time in the Energon Universe? What are we seeing for the first time ever? What are we seeing that's new, like Chameleon as this character from a Transformers episode from 1985, for example, and as a sort of placeholder for Baroness, since we don't have a, quote, normal sort of Cobra Baroness right now? What are we seeing that is out of order? I mean, sort of chronologically. So, for example, we're basically seeing bats before we see Cobra soldiers, and we're so if you think of the chronology of G.I. Joe, the Cobra soldier is 1982 and the Cobra bat is 1986. And I'm a little bit of a purist. I feel like in the story of G.I. Joe, you should follow that chronology generally. And Skybound is, Joshua Williamson said to us in our great interview with him, folks, that they're only really using characters from the first 2 or 3 years. I think he meant more G.I. Joe than Cobra, but it's sort of both here. And so I'm not bothered that the bats are showing up so early. And then the last thing that I think of as I'm reading these 20 comics is, what is happening too slowly, what's happening at the right speed, and what's happening too fast. And I don't know that Darklon is such an interesting character sort of overall in G.I. Joe or in the Energon Universe, that holding out for him to get his mask in a dramatic way a year from now, 2 years from now, I don't know that would do us any good. So I think that's a good thing to happen now. He's a smaller character. He's important for this miniseries. Maybe, some writers will use him to great effect in the next, year or two. Maybe not. I think I'm okay with either, if he shows up or if he doesn't. And in terms of Cobra coming together, and Cobra Commander and Destro and the twins sort of now on the same side, it took 20 issues for this to happen. On the one hand, I wish they had dragged this out a little longer, because I've liked it so much. I've liked these factions, and I've liked the sort of proto-Joes before the Joe team is formed, and I like the proto-Cobra agents before Cobra fully coalesces. At the same time, Cobra was fully formed in 1982 in issue 1 of G.I. Joe. It had already happened, right? Destro hadn't shown up, the twins hadn't shown up, but Cobra was already there, and G.I. Joe was already there. And so it's fun to get various versions of this where we see it happening, or something has already happened. We see it happen quickly. We see it happen slowly. I just keep being aware in a very general sense of the balancing act that the writers and editors at Skybound who are coming up with this stuff, and the artists, how they feel sort of pressured or sort of relaxed in how fast they're doing this stuff, how fast characters are showing up for the first time, how fast someone meets someone for the first time, how fast someone doesn't like someone or has a falling out. And it is a different sort of reading experience because, by comparison right now, the Larry Hama Real American Hero is just 1 comic a month. And we've been getting 2 Energon Joe comics a month. And, when IDW started, at the beginning, there were 3 comics a month. And then later there were 2. And then, with the Revolution story, there were more. So I think this is a very long and flowery way of saying I am both satisfied by the pacing of all this and also, as a sort of protective Joe fan and comics lover, a little worried might be too strong, but concerned that where any of this stuff could have happened a little more slowly, if it happens sort of all of a sudden, then it's, oh, are they going to run out of good stories to tell later? You know, it's sort of like it's like with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, executive in charge Kevin Feige was saying to the directors and writers, screenwriters 10 and 15 years ago, if you have a good idea in the for a movie, put it in the movie. Don't save it for the sequel. And that made for some really satisfying Marvel movies in, let's say, phases 1 and 2 and 3, because it didn't feel like they sort of struck a balance. Big things happened, the stakes were really high, and then they had to top it for the sequel. Whereas I would argue, like from a different cinematic universe point of view, that first Aquaman movie, I thought it was okay. It kind of felt like there were 2 movies worth of stuff crammed into there. And so I'm looking at this unfolding G.I. Joe story and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm also happy there's so much story for them to get to and characters and vehicles, and also a little anxious that they'll just run out of good stuff. And then I'll think, why did they go so fast? But I think I can imagine most readers don't want them to go slower. Mark, how do you feel about this pacing?
I think I'm happy with it. I think they're getting a good balance of not too fast, not too slow, essentially, in a nutshell. Yeah, because I mean, you don't want to hold back the good stuff. You want to get, you want to get into the stakes. You want to get into the excitement. You can only go so long before Cobra comes together, G.I. Joe comes together. Even as much fun as it might be to eke it out. And speaking of which, the final epilogue of this book is an element of looking forward to the future. I think that we've got this mysterious Cybertronian wreckage descending down into the Pacific Ocean. So as well as wrapping up the series with a bow, we're sort of looking forward to what is coming, and as they kind of describe in their blurb, the road to G.I. Joe issue 1 ends here.
So, Mark, do you have guesses what is here in the final 2 panels of Destro number 5?
I think it's something Cybertronian descending from space as a in the form of a kind of a meteor-like object, and it's gonna be something that Cobra are going to want to obtain, and I imagine from there would arise some tension, some stories.
Yeah, let's not forget that the cover to G.I. Joe issue number 1 has a bunch of Joes and Cobras standing on some Transformer parts.
Yeah.
They're not just standing on wreckage or vehicle parts. It's definitely robot stuff.
Yeah. And this is described as the Energon Universe. So, we've got to expect and not have it too much as a surprise that if in an issue, or even if in most issues, there is some sort of Energon connective element that is going to feature, in a big way or in a small way. And we definitely saw that in the pages of Storm Shadow as the Grand MacGuffin reveal. It's an Energon sword, essentially, isn't it? So here in the pages of Destro, there's been less Energon things driving it forward, but in the background there is that Energon as the power source that Destro has access to from Cobra Commander. And here, I guess we're reminded of that again with this Cybertronian meteor.
Yeah, another thing that I have thought sort of for the last year as I've been reading all these comics, not just the Joe ones, but also Transformers and Void Rivals, is what some fans, some average fans, some lapsed fans, some new fans want and don't want, and how the people at Skybound are, one balance is sort of how quickly or slowly do the story elements and characters come together. And the other is how much sci-fi in G.I. Joe, how much Transformers in G.I. Joe, how much Void Rivals in G.I. Joe. And I feel like going back a year or a year and a half to the earliest sort of interviews and press releases, there was this idea that, Void Rivals is in space. They're probably going to run into some Transformers. Transformers is on Earth, so they're going to run into G.I. Joe. And G.I. Joe is on Earth. So that's a G.I. Joe book, but they will run into some Transformers. And I think Skybound has earned a lot of goodwill from what you might consider a traditional G.I. Joe comics fan who wants it to be more grounded and not in outer space or with space aliens. At the same time, because the sci-fi elements have been introduced slowly, because Energon as an element actually makes a lot of sense in this version of a G.I. Joe universe. If you compare it to like the animated series, which had, ghosts and time travel and actually aliens in that one episode in 86, that both as a sort of a MacGuffin, because G.I. Joe and Cobra could benefit from sort of this accelerant, right? I think of Energon as this energy source as an accelerant, right? And then also, if you want a G.I. Joe universe without aliens and without glowing swords that seem to have like lightning capability, there's that other G.I. Joe comic you can read. But I'm not nervous. I'm excited, and I hope all the readers are A, happy and along for the ride, because B, Skybound is doing it well, and C, has sort of properly prepared everyone. From the very beginning, it's a shared universe, and also, it's not like issue 1 of G.I. Joe, where the Joes like find a dead Transformer, was the first G.I. Joe comic. It's been just a little bit for each miniseries. So I'm excited, and for fans who don't want Transformers stuff or alien stuff, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Very good. As a final, I spy, just to wrap up, I spy some G.I. Joe toys in the back. We've got a version of the snake armor in there. We've also, on one panel, got the CAT, the Crimson Attack Tank, which was a Sears exclusive from 1985, which is a black Mobat with red highlights, a Cobra version of the Mobat. I think it only appears on one panel. And then we've also got a funny little moment with the Crimson Guards reaching for rifles on a weapon rack, which of course reminds you of that sequence from G.I. Joe, the animated movie, where they are responding to Pythona's infiltration of the Cobra base and the alarms going off, and all of those Crimson Guards grabbing the rifles off the weapon rack.
This is not an Easter egg. This is just a science thing. I'll point out that Earth is really big, and
well done.
The chances that a satellite in orbit, whether it just got blown up or not, that where that is over Earth is the exact point where a meteor from space flies as it heads to entry, not re-entry, is unlikely, is astronomically unlikely. So it makes for a good visual that just a moment after Destro blows up the satellite that Astoria doesn't like, a couple pages later, something from space flies right past that. But A, that is very unlikely. It's sort of like,
I think it flies directly through it. I think the panel is implying.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I feel like enough time has passed that the pieces of the satellite that just got blown up by a nuclear warhead, not like a little missile, right? That debris would have scattered. So it makes for a good visual this is sort of like movie logic where it's like, what's the picture we need to link these two things together? Now, if later on the meteor from Cybertron, whatever it is revealed to have an intelligence or a ability to steer, and it did that on purpose, great. I don't need that explained right now, but it does stretch credulity a little bit that it's like, how long would it take Destro to finish his meal with Astoria, for them to make out, for him to pack, and then go to where's his tomb in the Himalayas?
I think that's in Scotland, isn't it? It's
Scotland, okay.
Scotland?
So to fly from the warm place where he had breakfast or dinner to the cold place to do the mask thing with Darklon, and then this is a day or two or three later. It's like, okay, well, let's just say the satellite sort of blew up. Anyway, makes for a great visual, but I thought, wait a minute, did that thing blow up like 7 days ago?
Well, it doesn't specifically to say the time zone. I think
okay, we could be
possible,
jumping back and
we could be
jumping back and forth a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's a slight implication from the way that Cobra trooper is describing it to Cobra Commander that it's happened relatively recently.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so we cut forward a few days to Destro doing the thing with Darklon, and then we cut back.
That's my impression. Yeah,
the Cobra officer telling Cobra Commander. Okay, yeah, I'll accept that. All right, still a little unlikely. The Earth. I mean, the Earth is big.
It's Mark from the future interrupting with some extra insight gleaned after the point that we recorded. Over on His Tank, member Sirex101 came up with a good observation, which was essentially that this is probably not the last that we'll see of Overkill. He crashed through this chunk of Cybertron, and then that chunk of Cybertron crashes somewhere on Earth, possibly in the Pacific. And so that's probably done with intent, that the combination of that Cybertron technology smashing through the Overkill satellite might mean that those two things combine. Maybe we will get like a Cybertronian Overkill AI robot thing, which would make sense because they've gone to all of this trouble of introducing this new character or concept, and they've still got this problem of the bats needing some intelligent leadership. So potentially we are being set up here with the future of Overkill to be continued down the line. So good observation, that man, and annoyed I didn't think of it myself. Okay, back to present day or past day, whatever. Yeah, let's score this one and wrap up. So my Yojo scoreage, I think I'll go in with a 7, a nice solid story. I think they stuck the landing and brought everything together nicely. I think Dan Waters has done a good job. I like his writing. The art is capable. I can see from comments online that people that that there are fans of this. It's not necessarily to my particular aesthetic style, but it's I can see that it's got its qualities, so I'm not gonna do it down. So yeah, overall pretty good stuff. And if this team comes back for a Destro Volume 2, would be happy to see them explore this world some more.
I will also. Am I giving this a 7 or an 8? I'll agree. I like the art. As I said in an earlier episode about this miniseries, Andrei Bressan, I like his art, and I think he does a good job. I do think here and there his storytelling could be a little stronger, and in terms of actual style and drawing, character of drawing, I would appreciate a little sort of superheroic or animation influence where things get a little exaggerated. Something is stretched, something is bent, something is curved, and his drawing is very grounded. So here and there, it can lack a little oomph or dynamism. Though I don't think it's stiff, and I don't think it's flat. I think it does have its own kind of oomph. I think the ending was really good, and I think in terms of both wrapping up this miniseries and also wrapping up the road to G.I. Joe, this is really satisfying. We get to see Cobra Commander be brilliant and manipulative. We get to see Tomax and Xamot be sneaky and brilliant and manipulative, but also get their comeuppance. We get some moments of revenge. We get this great reveal with Chameleon, who she is. I get some nice scrap iron moments. I think I'm gonna give this an 8. I guess. I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, which is I think a 9 or a 10 from Mark.
I don't think I ever grade higher than you. So
yeah. This might be a first.
For new listeners, I'm a grump.
I have stopped playing as many. I have not needed to use the nitpicker jingle in recent days. I think you have mellowed slightly. I'd mention as well that in terms of Cobra Commander in this issue, he is quite inscrutable. Quite silent. He's mostly there as a presence and an observer and a silent manipulator. He, I think, only has 2 speech bubbles in this whole series. Just an observation there, Tim. So I think we're done with Destro for now. Next time on Talking Joe, you can continue to hear us talking about the issues of G.I. Joe as they come out, whether that's A Real American Hero, G.I. Joe, the newly launched series from Joshua Williamson and Tom Riley, very, very exciting, or whether we're looking back to the Devil's Due era or something else entirely. You can find us in the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that directs you to various places that we are, like on Facebook, where we have a lively discussion and sharing of stuff. Like time of recording this, I've just recently posted the 5 interconnecting covers, the set of 2 that were created for this series. So look for all of the things like that being shared there, or on Twitter, where we are as Talking Joe, and also on Talking Joe Comics on Instagram. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/Talking Joe, where our backers Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, and Mike will get early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. Tim, where can people find you?
On YouTube, look for Atomic Abe. That's for essays on TV and film. My brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts is Hub Comics, and the website is hubcomics.com. And I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
And Tim, and where can people find the G.I. Joe artist Tom Riley on the Saturday after G.I. Joe issue 1 comes out?
Why, Mark, artist Tom Riley will be signing at my brick and mortar comic book store, Hub Comics, in Somerville, Massachusetts, on Saturday, November 16th, from noon to 4 p.m. That is indeed just 3 days after issue number 1 of G.I. Joe, drawn by Tom Riley, is released.
Great stuff. So I think that is us done for now. But until next time, please remember that
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.
Laters. Miss Moneypenny, you'll see me later as well. I'll show you my nuclear warhead.
No.